On October 8, 2018, Hurricane Michael underwent a 48-hour rapid intensification period where it went from a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 4 hurricane. By landfall on October 10, 2018 at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, Hurricane Michael was an unprecedented for the region Category 5 hurricane, making landfall near Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida. Hurricane Michael was the strongest hurricane in recorded history to make landfall on the Florida Panhandle. Landing with sustained winds of 161 miles per hour and a minimum pressure of 919 millibars, the storm was the fourth most powerful hurricane to hit the United States, spreading devastation far inland through many counties in northwestern Florida, from Bay County, Gulf County, Calhoun County, even through Jackson County and Leon County, where the state capital is located. Hurricane Michael was unique in that it maintained its major hurricane status all the way through the Florida-Georgia state line. As it entered Seminole County, Georgia, it was still a strong Category 3 hurricane. Across northwestern Florida and into the state of Georgia, Hurricane Michael was responsible for $25 billion in damages. These are the 31 voices of Hurricane Michael, representing the many unique experiences and perspectives of the community members who endured the storm and its impacts. Voices of hope, empathy, pain, lessons learned, grit, determination, and extensive insight into one of the most catastrophic hurricane seasons the Florida Panhandle has ever encountered.
Hi, I'm Melissa Thomas. On October 10th, 2018, Hurricane Michael made landfall in my hometown of Bay County, Florida. I did 31 interviews for the anniversary of Hurricane Michael in October 2019. 31 interviews that I premiered each day throughout the month. 31 voices, 31 perspectives, 31 unique experiences. And this is the finale feature that I had imagined a mashup and a storytelling of hurricane season 2018 with Hurricane Michael, using all the voices mashed up to tell this story. So bear in mind when you're listening to these interviews, it was a learning process for sure, this journey. And it wasn't till halfway through I'd been doing interviews that I realized I'm obsessive with letting people know I'm listening to them. So I'm, wow, huh, what, cool. And so when I'm transferring these phrases over to tell the story via a mashup of the voices of this style, when I'm pulling these phrases out of context, you might hear random, yeah, what, wow, cool. So that is that. You will hear that. This is a mashup of 31 interviews. Also, the images that will go along with the voices don't necessarily match the voice. So the voice talking and the names on the pictures are not an indicator of who is speaking in that moment. The names across the pictures throughout this entire finale feature are there just to ensure credit is given to everybody that provided footage for this project. It was very important to me to make sure that everybody that's a part of this project, all the voices, all of their work is their work and credited. So you will see the pictures, you will see the credit, and then you will hear the voices telling the story. But the voices are not necessarily the name on the screen of the picture, if that makes sense. Hopefully that's not too confusing. And anybody that comes across this project in the future hopefully watches this interview before they watch the rest of it. But if they get pieces of it, they'll be confused, and that's okay. They can sort it out later. But it's an interesting project. I know this is kind of unique and slightly confusing, but this whole process has been, this whole hurricane recovery and hurricane event has been kind of confusing. So it's just status quo. But thank you for taking the time to watch this interview. Thank you for taking the time to watch this finale feature of Hurricane Michael's voice and explore hurricane season 2018 and Hurricane Michael's landfall with all of us through this project. And you can see each interview in its entirety on my Facebook page, facebook.com/ThomasMelissaWX /. And I will also be making a Hurricane Michael's voice playlist on YouTube so that you can access each of the individual interviews in their entirety and also access this entire finale feature at a later date. Thank you so much. I'm meteorologist Melissa Thomas, and allow me to introduce you to the voices. of Hurricane Michael's voice.
Okay, Panama City was indeed home. I was born here in 1952 in Lisenby Hospital. Lisenby Hospital is now Lisenby Retirement Home. So I don't know if I'm going to go back out through Lisenby Hospital.
Panama City's been my home my whole life. I've never moved away. They lived here. My grandfather was born here in 1907.
In 2005, shortly after Hurricane Dennis had hit Panama City, or at least grazed Panama City, our family moved to Panama City, and I began working at WMBB at Channel 13 there in Panama City. And through the years, had worked first in the morning and then in the evening, and becoming their chief meteorologist about 10 years ago.
Panama City was always home to me, and I still consider it. I lived there since I was 4 and absolutely have loved it. It was knowing everyone, being able to have friends, running into people at Walmart, because that's where we all met up on Friday afternoons.
So we moved here, my husband and I and our 2 girls, 2 years prior to Hurricane Michael.
I've lived here since 1996 with my wife, and we bought our first house here.
We are military. We're Air Force. My husband's been serving for almost 18 years. So we moved to Panama City in March of last year, bought our first house together. And
I came to visit a girlfriend that lives in Panama City Beach about 23 years ago.
23 years.
And she took me to a little place called Hunt's Oyster Bar.
Hunt's.
Down on Beck Avenue. And I said, I'm going to have a shop down here one day, because I just fell in love with St. Andrews. It's such a charming little fishing village, and it has just so much natural beauty with being right on the water, and the community was very artful.
I actually, at the time, was living over in Callaway at a little apartment complex.
Panama City is home. I was born in Lisenby Hospital when it was a hospital, and grew up here. We lived out at Alligator Point at the time, before it became Bay Point area. And, went to school, graduated from high school here, worked the beach as a teenager, went to Gulf Coast Community College at the time, and turned into my husband out there.
Blufftown's been home for 42 years. We moved here from Lookout Mountain, Georgia, the largest big city is Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Beautiful.
We moved down here to build a church, and have been here ever since.
I grew up with everyone here in Calhoun County. I went to Calhoun County schools. My first jobs, my first car was all purchased here.
Well, Blountstown has always been a very small town where everyone knows everyone, so it was, and it's still that way to this day. It was just like one big dream under the trees that just never seemed to end.
We moved up here from Gainesville prior to a job promotion, and we probably was up here maybe a week and a half to 2 weeks.
My husband and I retired here in Mexico Beach a year and 2 months before the storm.
So how did we get here? I grew up in Pensacola. I met Adrian, and in order to get to Florida, he interviewed for jobs in city government and was hired as a city clerk in 2013. So before the storm, we'd been married almost 2 years. He'd been living here 5 years, and we were both volunteers on the fire department. I was the victim advocate, and he was city clerk for the city of Mexico Beach.
I knew we were due. We haven't had a big one hit in a long time since Opal, and I knew we were due because we had a very active hurricane season last year.
Well, the interesting thing is on Friday the 5th, it was still not developed. It had not yet become a depression, but it was certainly collecting, and models were looking very strong that it was going to more deeply develop. And the Hurricane Center was upping their percentages for development from 30 and 40 and 80%. And so on Friday, I left work that evening at WMBB in conversation on the air going, whatever happens, take the weekend, the weather was going to be perfect, to get everything ready. And if you've got to leave, do it now when the roads are clear, when there's gas at the gas stations, when there's cash in the ATMs. Use the weekend to do that. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy because the storm had not yet formed. It didn't really become an entity until Sunday night that weekend, to where it's coming in the Gulf, and here we go.
Not really. It was very sneaky, and it came up very fast.
Yes, it did.
And Lynn Haven, particularly the area that I live in, was under a mandatory evacuation because we live near the water. So even that, none of us really believed it was going to happen.
I had weathered the last Category 3 storm that we'd had hit in that house, and I figured it was solid brick. We had hurricane shutters, we had hurricane ties on the roof. We should be good.
We had friends come visit from Virginia. We were actually out on a boat the day that we found out it was coming. Monday that we found out, so I mean, we weren't thinking about a hurricane.
That summer I would have never thought that we would have been hit by a Category 5 hurricane. And it's funny because I had actually emailed my manager and I was like, hey, we've got a hurricane coming this way. I'm going to be leaving on Wednesday. And then when I watched the Weather Channel that morning, I was like, no, I think I'm going to be leaving tomorrow and I need to leave now to go buy plywood to board the house. So yeah, it changed literally like really fast. Because we got to pack up everything. One of the good things we've always done anytime we've had to evacuate, we always take all of our family photos and, important insurance documents. So one good thing with us is we had that. Like some things are irreplaceable.
Like I said, I was out of town in Atlanta.
He works out of
Went
town.
to sleep at night and was talking to her, not worrying about it. I said, it's a 2 or 3. It's nothing. It's just going to rain. It's going to be
Gonna be a lot of rain.
And then I woke up in the morning, like 5 o'clock, whenever to get ready for work. And they said it was a 4, could be a 5. And I was like, oh my God. So I was like shaking, grabbing random stupid stuff. I wasn't even thinking in my hotel room. Threw it in a bag and shot home at that point. Because I was like, Category 5 will change your life. You know what I mean? I already know for sure. You know what I mean? Especially if you're a kid or you're young, it changes your life.
We were more concerned with her health issues, quite frankly, than we were about the storm. When we started hearing about the storm, though, she had just had her 3rd surgery about 11 days prior to the storm making landfall. So she had a very large incision in her back over her spine, and it had not healed yet, it had not closed. So we called and spoke to the doctor. I think the doctor, maybe the PA, and asked about evacuation, whether we should do it. And they actually advised us against it because her spine wasn't healed yet and they didn't want her sitting up for too long. They were afraid of damaging the work that they had done.
So the commander basically said, you have to leave. And we were like, okay, living on base on the coast, like we totally get that. We live all the way up here. So he made a case to his commander and they were like, okay, well, so they were gonna let us stay. And then the night before, I guess, we were at our neighbor's house having a hurricane party and we're drinking and playing cards and doing whatever, and it was fine. And we left their house probably 11:30, midnight. We were like, all right, we're gonna go make sure everything's pulled up. We pulled everything from our backyard, put it into our building on the side of the house, and we were fine. We were ready to go. And man, that night was a whirlwind. We got a call at 1:30 from his commander and said it just got upgraded from a 3 to a 4. You don't have a choice. Like, you're gonna leave.
October 3rd, I ended up having some heart issues, ended up being in the hospital, and ended up being on bed rest before the storm.
Doing life as normal. We've gotten storms, but never really anything bad. So, we got a couple cases of water and thought, all right, we're good to go.
Oh yeah, never have I left for a hurricane at all. No,
even more
stayed through Opal, everything.
I never want to evacuate. It's a pain. I don't want to go anywhere. And I remember my son was telling me the weekend before the hurricane that there was a tropical storm named Michael, which he thought was really funny because that's his best friend's name. And so they were joking about how Michael was coming to smash up Florida. And I was like, what tropical storm? I haven't even heard about a tropical storm. And then as it turned and grew, and I just started to have a really bad feeling. My husband used to live in the Virgin Islands. So he's been through tons of hurricanes. He doesn't care. And he came home on Monday and I was like, honey, I really think that we should go to your dad's because my father-in-law lives in Alabama. And I thought, I really, really feel like we ought to take the kids and go.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, I don't want to leave. I don't, what if something like a window blows out at the house and then I can't patch it? Like, I would much rather be here.
It's the word is prepared, and you think you're prepared, and all the things that you think are important, you find out later after the storm and during the aftermath that those things weren't as important as some of the other things that you didn't do. But honestly, knowing what to do was the hardest thing. Mandatory evacuation order came through. We had so much indecision. Leaving, we packed up our cat and essentials, things that we thought were we were going to be gone for a couple days. The main concern was thinking there'd be no power. Yeah. We'd come back to no power.
Well, this sounds kind of silly, but I was kind of excited about it.
I remember Chris Smith hit the nail on the head about a day before when he pointed out that this would be the biggest hurricane that has ever hit Northwest Florida.
Well, I think we were prepared. Yeah. I mean, we try to get prepared every year for hurricane season. We stock up the water and we put away food and all that kind of stuff. But we prepared for a 3 because that's what they said it was going to be. When it hit, was a 3.
Yep.
I went to bed that night on a 3. Got up to a 5.
My husband and I tend to kind of keep an eye on things, and if it's, when it's still a tropical storm, we'll go out and we try to fill our gas cans, get water, MREs or shelf-stable foods. Just touching base with the severity of Michael, I don't think anyone could have been fully prepared for that. But, we did make an attempt to prepare.
When I lived, north of town, I didn't have public water. You had a well, so if you didn't have power, you didn't have water. So doing laundry, do all your laundry, do the dishes, get everything cleaned up so that because you're going to go days without power and you want everything that you can do.
So I went and got gas. I ended up, how far it is out there, the west end of the beach. So I drove and this place was filled up and that place. So I went all the way over to 22 thinking, or that new Valero, whatever that thing is, where the dollar store is, thinking I'll get in there real quick. There was like 40 people there. Monday afternoon.
And we were in touch all day because we knew, and I work for Bay District School, so we got off earlier. I got off earlier than Bobby, and he said, go to Lowe's and get a weather radio.
Yeah, that was pretty.
So I went and got a weather radio, the one that cranks,
But we had been taught through our government work to prepare. We're each responsible for ourselves and our families. Prepare for the worst. Always prepare for the worst and be pleasantly surprised if it doesn't happen. Well, we always check everything. And we had, prior to Hurricane Michael, at least twice, we had done the putting up the shutters drill to practice. And my husband is the one that really knows how to do that the best. But he walked me through it too. And it's like, you do it in this order. In this window, you put this and you do it in this order and you put this and you go the next and the next and the next. And even to the point of, we have shutters for the garage and that's the last and you do half and you get the car in and then and it's a lot of work. And I did learn that it's not something I could probably do by myself very easily. It's always good to have someone to call on.
Before the storm, we closed early. I mean, nobody was out doing anything. We had a few people come in looking for flashlights and things like that. They couldn't, because the dollar stores and everything around here sold out. I went out and bought stuff because I knew my grandchildren was coming to my house.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I was going to have 2 daughters come to my house or 3 daughters come to my house. So I tried to have, junk food for the kids and stuff. Well, then she tried to prepare for my husband who has sugar problem. Yeah. And so it was funny. Each one of us preparing for the other, But
being as a Category 3 hitting land. Yeah. Because we're so far inland, that really wasn't a big deal. But whenever it started jumping overnight, we're all kind of looking at each other like we probably should have evacuated.
I told my husband, even at a Category 3, we're not staying in a trailer. No, we're going to go into somebody's strong, sturdy house and do a little powwow and then go from there because you never know what's going to happen. Yeah. Winds are unpredictable.
So we're in the house. We've got several animals, 10 dogs and 11 cats. We couldn't go anywhere anyway.
Yeah. I'm always, what did my dad always say? He always said, always expect the unexpected. We knew something was going on. Maybe a woman's intuition, maybe mom's intuition, maybe just all the experience I've had over the years with all the hurricanes. But I mean, nothing will really prepare you for what we went through, ever. I don't care what anybody says, but hindsight is always 20/20. So the whole experience of it, okay, so we're going through the motions, we're, prepared, preparing ourselves as we're going through everything, but I don't think we're fully realizing everything. We're not fully taking in everything like we should because we're just in the motions of it all. So we're going to the store to get things and we see people, some people are frantic. Some people like us are like, dude, chill, it's okay. Like, you get some things too, whatever, and just kind of make your way through the crazy people that are about to have a meltdown and nothing's happened yet.
They actually came to my job and I couldn't even go back home because they were evacuating Bluntstown into the shelter. So
police and fire all split up town and we started knocking doors. And we did the thing, okay, who's your next of kin? Who should we notify if something happens to you? And here's a Sharpie, please write your social security number on your arm. So we knocked.
To convince people at that point that maybe they should go.
And we had 7 pets, so we knew relocating and moving or leaving was not an option. Yeah. So we watched the news. We really went to bed comfortable with it because we survived other storms. Yep. It really wasn't apparent how deadly it was until it was too late to leave.
I was just kind of sitting on my front porch for probably the first few bands of it during the tropical storm portion, and I'm just, just kind of watching it, just enjoying the rain and the wind and the coolness. And then as the wind started picking up, I was like, okay, I need to go inside. By this point, the electricity had been cut. I look over and I can see daylight, darkness. And I realize that the edge of the roof is lifting up and thudding. And I'm like, oh, shit. I need to get downstairs now. The roof's about to go. And I'm shoving my dog, who is like 75 pounds at this point, in front of me, making her go down the stairs. And we hit the hallway. And moments, within mere milliseconds later, the roof just completely got ripped off. The suction from the roof being pulled off. And then I was having trouble shoving her down the hallway to the bathroom. So my dog was in the bathroom, or in the toilet, in the tub, and I wedged myself, bracing my feet against the toilet, and had my back braced against the wall, and I'm just feeling the wall just shudder. But when that bottom pane of glass got pulled in, it actually lessened the suction in the house so much that it was so much easier. I felt like I could breathe again. Yeah. Because up until that point, it was like, I don't know, 1,000-pound weight on your chest trying to breathe.
We immediately moved all the furniture in front of the doors and windows in that room. It was a Florida room, but still they shook. Yeah. I remember prior to that moment of trying to discover what we were going to do, very little do I remember about that day, but flashbacks come. I think it's PTSD. But I remember walking into we have a galley kitchen that leads to the Florida room, and it was dark. All the power was gone. And it's dark in that central area because there's only one window that leads to the Florida room, and that's where the light comes from. Yeah. The winds and rains, when all the windows and doors were gone, just come in. And it was like you're living in the midst of a horrible nightmare you can't get out of, and you don't know which way to turn. But my husband said he saw me on the ground trying to grab my son's college application stuff. I don't remember that.
So I left a 14-inch strip of window unboarded in our living room window that actually overlooks our backyard and our pool. Yeah. So we actually took turns standing on a stool looking at the top 14 inches and watching our neighborhood be destroyed. That was a very sobering thing. We watched roofs come off. We watched a lot of things that were in people's backyards, but also things like a small boat be rolled around by the hurricane. And we watched pine trees, massive pine trees being snapped like twigs. So we realized the gravity of what was going on. We saw our 330 feet of fence all get blown down. We had a shed in our backyard that I'd gone to great pains to lock the doors. I even put zip ties on the door because I was afraid the storm might blow the doors open. And the doors were still together the last time I saw the building as it went over the top of the pine trees. And we have never found any piece of that building. And it was about 50 feet over the tops of a mature pine forest the last time I saw it.
Yeah, then the storm hit, and we all sat on our phones in basically silence. And of course, the kids didn't really understand what's happening. Her boys are a little older, so they kind of got it, but mine had no idea what was happening. Didn't understand why we weren't at home, why our dogs were with us, because, you know, unless we're on a road trip, we don't take the dogs. So that was weird, and he just wasn't real sure what was going on. And of course, we're all very stressed, which they feel. And we didn't know anything, and we couldn't get a hold of the neighbors, and we couldn't get a hold of anybody. And we sat for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Nervous. I saw the big tree in front of my house, like in my yard. My house is already starting to flood. It knocks over a power pole. Power pole goes down in the water, and I see the electrical current coming, but my house is starting to flood, so I see the current going in my house. And I'm screaming, and my sister's in the background, we're gonna die.
Oh my gosh.
I call 911, and I'm calling my neighbor screaming. I'm like, what do? I take a blanket, throw it over, and they're like, get in the hallway. Get in the hallway right now. The eye is 10 miles from your house.
Like kind of watching out the windows, you know, just watching the trees start breaking, and we're like, all right, kids, y'all gotta go. So I actually laid her down for a nap in the pack and play in the hallway, which was a blessing because she slept for like 2 hours during the storm.
But so I mean, like you could literally feel it rocking. Okay, so I just knew we're gonna roll any minute. But before we even got in the closet, we were watching our privacy fence fly away. So in the closet, 4x4s coming through the windows. It was like Twister, the movie.
You know, you're going to turn into a spectator, you know, which is unfortunate, but it's just the human condition. You're going to sit there, and all we watched was the Weather Channel and just watched it all unfold. And then when they announced that it had hit land, some reports are coming through. Of course, communication was not so good here. Somebody I work with, Jen, who works with me. She works with me again. She took a break. She was nice enough to go with her phone and videotape our house. Oh, look, everything's okay, guys. She's sheltered through the storm. And she had a young child and pets and everything else. And she goes, there's no power, but your house is still here. Unfortunately, the house is up on pilings. It's an old 1942 Wainwright shipyard house, brick, okay? I sat there for a year after year and said, this place is brick, nothing's gonna happen to it. Look how long it's been here. I told my wife, like a fool, don't be like that. You know.
My best friend in Orlando gave me a scripture that I took into my bunker, and it was Psalm 57:1, and it's a great scripture. It says, "O Lord, have mercy on me, O Lord, have mercy on me. I will be protected under the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed."
Like a double-edged sword, because it washed away Mexico Beach and blew away Panama City. And the way it was coming in was wash Mexico Beach away, blow away Parker, Springfield, Panama City, Tyndall. We're talking white-out hurricane conditions to where you couldn't see nothing, you couldn't hear nothing but the roar. I have a lightning alert, and it hit 0.6 miles away from my house during that eye wall. Lightning that close, I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. Found out by just the screaming demons of that hurricane.
I was wearing some beads that I had gotten her as a Christmas present that had been blessed by the priest. I don't know how to use the beads, but I was wearing them and holding on.
The water was coming in through all the windows.
It's running down the walls.
And the back door, I had to tie it to the washer because there's no way I was able to hold it. And you just hear it, you know? And you can feel the floor under your feet trying to give. Trying to give. And then the sound that I heard was like 1,000 freight trains passing by both sides of the house.
But beside that cement pole, they've never changed out the other side, and it's a wooden pole. So I'm there, and I'm watching one of these waves come through, and all of a sudden, I mean, the power's done gone. I see that pole break, and it's coming from my house. And I'm so afraid because everything I love's in that house, and I don't know where it's going to hit. But by the grace of God, a huge, huge pine tree caught it, and it wrapped around it and come down.
It hit me like a ton of bricks was when the National Weather Service in Tallahassee issued that shelter-in-place high wind warning for East Bay County, for Gulf County, which is typically saved for tornadoes. You know, I only saw it one other time with a hurricane, and that was Hurricane Charlie in the Fort Myers area. It's a very seldom issued warning. And when that came out, you know, we were obviously on the air, and I didn't really parse the words. I just read the bulletin, and it just occurred to me that people now had to shelter in their homes in a place where they never had to before, and that this warning was so dire that to me it was like, you know, I'm hoping that people are getting this message. You know, it was like 9 or 10 o'clock that morning of October 10th. So I was like, I just hope they got the message that they have to get to that interior hallway in that closet, or, you know, get to the bathroom, do something to get away from what could be a collapsing wall. And that made it really real. Not that it wasn't real before then, but that drove a point in my head, like, this is going to be worse. You know, there was that point Tuesday morning, but there was that point 24 hours later when catastrophe was about to happen in Bay County. And it was hard to control that moving forward that morning, because every word that you said, okay, here's Hurricane Michael, the pressure's down to 9, whatever, the winds are at 1, whatever. That didn't matter. I don't mean that flippantly. What mattered was people were crouched down in their homes. So it's hard to sort of separate the personal from the professionalism in that moment.
Watching the Weather Channel on my phone, because we still had signal as it's coming through, and he heard him say, you know, put a helmet on. So he screams for his football helmet. He's got his football helmet on, squeezing one of the dogs to death, saying, please, devil, go away. Because he's never been through a bad storm.
Yeah.
This was his first hurricane. He was 12 at the time.
And the fire alarm's going off. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I smell smoke. I thought it was all psychosomatic from the fire alarms. But I you know, was running around saying, I smell smoke. And my husband said, there's no smoke. There's no smoke. It's just, you know, from the building shaking. And so he calmed me down. And we had our drapes pulled on the front at that point because there was so much wind, and we were afraid that the glass might break. And I opened the drapes and looked out, and we have an 8-foot balcony. I couldn't see the railing on the balcony at that point. It was just white everywhere, except for black things just flying by, you know, objects.
Of course, you know, the power going out and the cell phones, you know, you tried to keep in touch with them up until that point, until everything went off. And then you had no idea if everyone was okay or not. And created panic because I couldn't reach my children.
I was actually in Chipley, Florida when the storm hit. Okay, yeah. So a little bit further west. Yeah.
She was in Chipley. I've got another daughter that was up in Mariana. You know, and the last I heard from her was they live in a mobile home and surrounded by trees. Said trees were falling on the house, on the cars, busting windows. She was 6 months pregnant.
Oh, goodness.
So, yeah, and her and the other grandbaby in Chipley. And
it was not even a year old.
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard.
You're enclosed in a shelter with other panicking people. It's like, yeah, your nerves get racked. So.
It was really hard. You know, you can't control anything. In Dothan, the weather got bad. So, of course, the whole time I was watching the Weather Channel, but then when their cable and power went out, you know, I can't watch the Weather Channel. So you're just really hoping and praying that everything's going to be okay. We were actually looking out of our hotel windows, and you could see the light posts. They were moving. So it was really bad there, too. It's kind of like the next day when we went out of our hotel, you could see debris in Dothan as well. But yeah, that's how big Michael was.
I
remember all of a sudden it got really bright and we thought the window had busted, but we looked up and I remember standing there in front of the window and like I said, my papa was there and I don't cuss or anything in front of him, but I just remember saying, holy, like multiple times over and over and over again because my mom's house is brick. And you think it's like a safe house, and they have this giant front porch. And I remember you just saw like a brick start to fall. The porch
looking
started
out
to
the
fall.
window, the porch started coming apart.
And as
then
the
we
porch
saw
started going,
bricks
yeah.
come by, and I was like, oh man, bricks. That's
And when
bad.
the porch ripped off, it took part of the roof with it.
Then the roof started peeling back.
So then you're looking up at the sky and the hurricanes in the house.
Her mother got
raining.
hit by sheetrock in the head.
We're
and
trying
she
to
was
like clean up
bleeding.
stuff.
It was pretty intense for a while.
Yeah, as the ceiling's falling, you're trying to like save everything from underneath
Which
it,
is
you know?
stupid. I mean, in the end,
But you don't
throw
think-
it all away in the end.
Yeah,
but
you don't think
while you're
about it at the
trying to-
time. The people we were staying with got a phone call from someone from their church that they were starting to get scared. It was a Spanish-speaking family that lived just a little bit off the intercoastal and didn't have anywhere else to go and were starting to get scared. So we left in the big truck. The guys are too scared to go with us.
It's 11:30 in the morning and this thing's about to come ashore.
Yeah, no. The two of us ladies went and picked up the family I went with because I speak Spanish to tell them what to do and what to bring. And the trees were swaying. And on the way there, we were fine, but on the way back, trees had started to fall. So we made it underneath all the power lines. That was the only thing I was worried about. But it was only a little bit after we got back that the power went out. You know, we live by the Air Force Base, so we hear jets all the time. And I swear, from noon on, I was like, why are there jets flying? And I didn't realize that was actually the sound of the storm. It sounded like a jet when it's going overhead. And I don't know if that was strictly the wind or the wind through, there's a cell phone tower there, if it was the wind through the cables. But it was so loud, like they were flying right overhead and just nonstop. Everything was out. It was starting to get a little warm, sticky. We're all sitting in the dark in the closet. And Bubba got his guitar and we started singing gospel hymns. And it was just to keep everyone calm.
And it really didn't last.
And the ceiling just fell on my head because the roof was gone, the ceilings. So there's no like filling water. You know, the whole thing about filling the bathtub up with water.
Yeah.
That didn't work. There were spices flying from the kitchen into the bathroom.
Our sheriff made the determination that after 50-mile-per-hour winds, sustained winds, we would not be able to respond. It wouldn't be safe for even the lower profile Crown Vics to go out in that kind of winds. And we did make an attempt even after that to rescue someone that had multiple trees on their trailer. And unfortunately, we weren't ever able to get there until after the storm. Sometimes when you're in the middle of the worst day of your life or the worst month of your life, we can't come out and help. But at the end of the day, you know, they wouldn't have made it anyways. There were so many trees down, and it's just putting another life in danger.
I was at Nickman, and the bad storm came.
And what room were you in, hiding?
I don't know.
The bathroom?
Yeah.
And it started picking up, and it continued. There was lulls there, and we walked around the side, and a limb had fallen. This was probably 9 o'clock.
Yeah, in the morning.
And
One limb.
Someone in the video, I said, oh no, I said, that's that sound. That's it, the sound of a Cape Verde hurricane. I hear it. That wind never really, increased in intensity, but it howled. It had that wow, and you can hear it. And
it was loud, and then when we started hearing the glass flying and the, furniture and all that, it was pretty terrifying. And it was scary. When I saw that he was scared, then I was really scared.
yeah, I thought we'd gotten ourselves in a lot of trouble. I can tell you that.
And she said, the building's moving. I'm like, no, it's not. We're in a good building and everything like that or whatever. It's a hospital. It's fine. I sat on top of the desk and it literally swayed back and forth, side to side, really, side to side. And I immediately went into survivor mode. It's either fight or flight.
And so it's just like a whiteout outside, and leaves have gone up against the screens and things, and you really can't see. So then that panic level comes up a little bit because it's loud and you can't see what's happening and you can't go anywhere and you can't do a thing. We have lights, we have air conditioning. I could go to the fridge if I wanted to. I didn't want to. That anxiety level is just right here. And at one point, we felt something. The whole house, you just, what was that type of, what was that? And we're trying to look out the windows, and like I said, we couldn't really see. In our interior hallway off of the family room, there's a half bath with a skylight. We went and looked up there, and I went, uh-oh, there's limbs over the skylight. They're not supposed to be there.
It's very interesting what mankind has a tendency to do in the most outlandish of experiences they're going through.
So they want to video record it.
Yep.
They want to take their selfies and do their Instagrams. So a lot of our soldiers, the younger ones, had the cameras out and they're videoing the ceiling pulling down, like peeling off, the rain coming in. And I'm just kind of watching the ceiling lose integrity, and stuff was starting to flap enough to where it was going to fall. And I had to cuss a little bit to get them back to reality and tell them to get to our secondary shelter. So we had our primary shelter was the main gymnasium, and secondary was in our rooms.
I think the most interesting part of that story when you told me the first time is that people tend to get so busy taping one part of it that their focus is off the rest of their peripheral. They don't realize the roof's coming off over their head, busy watching another part of the roof go off. I thought that was very unique. And probably something I would do. Just future reference.
That's another reason why I asked you not to come in.
It was unreal. For about 30 to 45 minutes we were in that, and we stayed in that room until it was over. And then it was like the most beautiful calm. You walk out and there's devastation everywhere, and you're praying your neighbors are okay. You're thanking God that you're okay and your family's okay. Then you sense a little bit of a guilt about it because you don't know if your loved ones that are in the area are okay. You don't know if your elderly neighbor that's next door that's a widow is okay. You don't know if anyone's okay, because it's like a quiet, an eerie quiet and calm, and a breeze blowing that I can't describe. It's almost like experiencing a nightmare, waking up to realizing it's not a nightmare. It is a nightmare. It's not real.
Yeah.
But this case, it was real.
Yes, and everybody else seemed to start coming out and like check on their surroundings, and then they started doing the same thing, because being out there, there was one way in, one way out. So if we didn't clear it, we didn't know how long it would take for any kind of emergency crews to come in. Since Mom was visiting my dad out of state, she was actually already contacting our homeowners insurance, and she was going ahead and like filling out stuff for FEMA, and for not just for us but for my grandmother as well, because she didn't know what she was going to be walking into, but she wanted to go ahead and have that stuff processed, because she knew that once she got here there was no internet, no cell phone signal, nothing.
We were only using Facebook at that point. No one knew where we were. So Carrie was handling all of that Facebook messaging, trying to let people know the door was open. And then initially we saw anyone who walked through the door for free. So we had people that were not our patients that just needed emergent care right after.
Our neighborhood came together fabulously, and everybody pitched in to help everybody else. So we tarped our roofs, and we gave people food and water. We shared indiscriminately. Anybody that needed something, if we had it, we shared it. And we tarped each other's roofs, and we checked on one another day and night. People with generators, long generators in some cases to other people. Everything worked well. And so for 6 or 8 days after the storm, we were survivors as well. And we knew all we have to do is wait until they get the water and the power back on. It's all going to be fine. But we did not know about the hidden dangers of Hurricane Michael. But she was getting a bacterial infection from the impure water. But look for other ways you can be impacted by the storm like that. we knew that there was a chance we may lose shingles off our roof. We knew there was a chance we may have some damage to our home or some trees blown over. We never thought for a moment that a hurricane could lead to a bacterial infection that could be life-threatening.
My uncle, or my husband's uncle, wasn't even sure that his house was standing for a long time, and he doesn't really talk to his neighbors or didn't know them or whatever, and so he couldn't get a hold of anybody. He has like one lady that lives kind of around the corner from him, and he couldn't get a hold of her to go see if his house was even standing. And he finally got a hold of somebody else from work, and they said, oh, everything down there's gone. So of course he settled into this like, oh my gosh, everything I had was gone. And it was probably 2, maybe 3 days after that the NOAA, they released their satellite imagery, their map.
Okay, yeah. Yep.
And so, of course, that link went viral of like, hey, you can see. So we, of course, checked on our house, and I grabbed my phone. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. And so we zoomed in on my husband's uncle's house, and it was there. There was a tree across the top, but it was there.
And, you know, we live on a side street off of Tyndall Parkway, so nobody got to us for days. We cut our own selves out. All the neighbors had guns because we heard of the looting, you know, and then a lot of the women, while the men were cutting and they were able to get out, we were driving to Destin just to get food and to get supplies. So I had no cell service, so I went all the way to Destin 2 days later to get me a cell phone. And then I had these people from Oklahoma who dealt with tornadoes. They paid for my groceries. And I just started crying in the middle of Walmart.
When the storm was over, we walked outside, and I don't know why, but it had like a purple hue. We didn't have enough food. Like, we had plenty of food in the freezer, but after so long, that's
gonna be
done for.
worthless, yeah.
We cleared it out and stayed the night that one night, and then left the next day. We ended up coming back. My husband came back. Like, me and my husband and the kids came back and dropped him off, and then I went back to Kentucky for a few weeks.
Down. I am not in good shape, so I have to walk like 3 miles down a soggy clay road to make sure she's okay, and then turn around and walk back. But I mean, and because they were in Callaway.
There's just water all the way across the street. There's all these light poles down. And I finally posted a comment. I said, where is this? And somebody said he's just passing the Walmart in Callaway, which is right by my house. And the street's covered with water. Where would water even come from there? And there's all the light poles are down, all the lights are off, there's emergency vehicles everywhere, there's trees everywhere. And then I see the Chick-fil-A and I see the, the Starbucks, and I'm like, this is this is where I live. I can walk to these places. And it was terrifying. And I was like, how do we fix this? Like, how do you fix this much destruction?
I-10 was closed at that time. I think it was about probably 3 or 4 days before we could even attempt a run. It started to kind of become real when we hit Mariana. We pulled our fuel, started seeing the long lines. We saw a lot of what I call the highway heroes, people heading this way, linemen and people with supplies and stuff like that. Then I'm like, okay, we're getting close to ground zero. She goes, we're not going to stay there our way. I'm like, no. She goes, no power. I go, no house. It seems kind of silly, but it is really the truth. To me, it was almost like a death in the family, losing a house.
Oh, yeah.
It was our first house that we owned, and we've been there so long. I mean, not valuable at all, not the greatest neighborhood, but it is to me now. I'm nostalgic for it.
There was a lot of destruction for landmarks that had been there always. The Arts and Cultural Center next door to me lost its roof, which was full of local artwork. My initial feeling was just heartache, that to see something that was such a vital, growing, thriving community to be broken up. At that point, I think finding out that the people you loved were still alive was probably the driving force with our community, that everybody tried to get to the ones they loved because we had no communication.
Yeah, we lost about 80% of our belongings. All of our furniture is gone. We just purchased a brand new washer and dryer. It was gone. Very nice NASCAR collection. Cars from the 1980s, 90s till now. They were all in packages, boxes. They all got wet, and they're worthless now.
and sit outside. And if he was out there, I'd flash the flashlight to see if he's still out there. And he'd flash back, let me know I'm still here.
Yeah.
And the next day when I met him, we had a big cookout. I invited everybody over, you know, for a giant cookout. If you got food, let's throw it on the grill. Let's, you know, get everybody fed, just lots of food. And I got to meet him. And I told him, I said, look, I'm gonna be out here, you know, until we get some kind of police. We had no police on the road. We had nobody. There was no army. I mean, they had a post on Michigan Avenue.
Yeah.
But Peters Drive, nobody drove down our road. We took care of our road. We went to those places and got supplies and we loaded them in the back of the truck and went around to places like the Cove and people that I worked with and dropped off supplies to them, made sure that they were okay. And when I would tell them that, hey, this is not just for me, I'm distributing it, they would pile it in the truck. So the military did the same thing, you know, when they said, well, here's 10 cases of bottled water.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I want 10 cases of bottled water. And he's like, give it away, help people. And I was like, you got it. And that's what kind of gave me the idea. And they did the same thing with MREs. And I mean, and charcoal was something that we really needed and they really helped us out with was charcoal.
Yeah.
Because you can't use your gas because the hurricanes, the gas lines are out.
Yeah.
You can't use your electric stove because the power's out. You know, if you didn't have propane, charcoal was the way to go.
Yeah.
And charcoal is the way I want to stay now. Since we called our hamburgers that we made during a Cat 5 burgers.
I know for was it at least a couple of weeks, wasn't there an alcohol ban across the county, even through into Panama City Beach?
They did that for a couple of reasons, and I kind of like don't like it, and then I kind of do like it. I mean, my thing was I liked it because you don't want people to get all liquored up and want to fight each other and stuff. Same scenario what I just explained. Throwing fruit out of somebody's house because of a generator. I mean, how much did you have to drink to do that?
Yeah.
Look at what we just went through. You know, deal with the sound of the generator.
Yeah.
The whole neighborhood sounds like it. You're not going to get away from it.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's got their windows up trying to get air in here. You're going to hear generators. But then you want people to take the edge off what just happened.
Yes.
And then
I felt like I had been dropped in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on a little bitty rock.
Yeah.
And there was nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And then we, you know, like she says, we went and checked on neighbors and that kind of thing. But I think that was the shock, was the initial, was the silence. So that rainwater sure came in handy.
Yeah.
And luckily the only thing that survived was a little tabletop grill. And we had charcoal and fluid. So every morning, Darlene would put it in the front porch. We had to try to cook everything we had or give it away because we lost a lot of food. And she pioneer days, back in the cowboy days. And there's one story that really touched my heart that made me cry. Is there was a lady and her husband came from Alabama, is that right?
I think it was Alabama.
Her little boy and girl wanted to help Panama City.
No.
So they made ham and cheese sandwiches.
Aw.
And
The kids made them.
Yeah.
Good children?
And they pulled up and said, we were sitting outside on the front porch, and they said, would y'all like something to eat? And I looked at Darlene, I'm like, well, yes, ma'am.
I'm always hungry.
So they gave us a little bag with a ham and cheese sandwich, a little chip bag, and a cookie. And they told us that their children wanted to help us. I mean, that really touched my heart. I just wanted to cry. And when I ate that sandwich, it was the best ham and cheese I ever tasted in my whole life. Because it had a lot of love in there, you know. And strangers.
So sweet. Yeah.
Strangers going.
Was donating all this food to all their employees and everything, and we had plenty, and so we wanted to share it.
That excess.
And so Gloria said, well, let's go down there and see
Yeah.
if we can help somebody. And then the next week we went around to the other one that's off of Sherman,
right,
to see if anybody in there needed anything.
And it's what we did every day, all day long. We bought generators for other family members and other people we knew that needed it, couldn't get it. They did so many roofs and cut so many trees, dug people out. And then the store, when Joni and I come to do the store, it was so full of water. there was water all the way up to these, up here. I mean, there was water everywhere. We had no phone for 2 months, no internet for 2 months. And even when the electricity come back on, it would go off. The city and the counties would go off every day just about for a certain amount of time.
The survival mode thing was really what was next, the next part of it. And that has its own set of consequences of trying to survive through the aftermath and the rubble. A lot of people at my work lost their homes. I don't think anybody except for a couple of people didn't have damage. And at least the roof of my house wasn't broken, so the water didn't come in, so it was livable, if you will. So I decided that next day, I'm just going to go stay in my house without power, without water, obviously, but at least I've got my roof and my bed. And what you don't expect to hear is gunfire in the middle of the night. What you don't get used to hearing is generators running constantly all night long. And the chainsaws, at 7 a.m. they're up cutting. And without AC and without water, just what's going to happen? Where are you going to get a meal? Where are you going to eat? Travel was really spotty. Being able to leave town was very spotty. And so for me, it was, let's get up and survive today. And I go across the bridge at Inlet Beach on Highway 98 heading into Walton County, and there's cars everywhere off the road. And I was going, what? Nothing really clicked in my mind. And then all of a sudden my phone lit up again. And apparently once you got into Walton County, the cell service was awesome. And so people were pulling off the road to use their cell phones. Life there, we were over toward Destin, and life there was just going on. It was still, a beautiful mid-October day in Walton County, no problems here. And then you drive back and you get over the Hathaway Bridge and you go, oh my gosh, it's an amazing, that stretch of road between Panama City Beach into Walton County, where you go from utter devastation toward the Hathaway Bridge to the Emerald City of Wizard of Oz over at South Walton. That was a real eye opener, because you think everybody's going through it. You just think that because you are and your friends are, that everybody is, and the fact is that it's just you. It's just you and your friends and your family and your coworkers and your community. Sort of a snapshot of Channel 13 of WMBB. It's like, we just got smacked pretty bad, but you know what? We're still going to do what we do. And no matter where we did it, which was on director seats in a parking lot, but we were able to pull it together, and it was a point of communication where we could get at least information out of what's happening.
See, I was part of the CERT team during Charlie and Ivan.
Really?
And Jean and Francis. So I've seen it all before. You never understand what those people are going through until you go through it yourself.
Oh, wow.
I have a totally different I have a totally different understanding for what those people went through now.
Yeah.
Now I understand how they were feeling and why they were getting so upset with the Red Cross and the Salvation Army and everybody else. People were always upset because they weren't getting the help. They weren't getting the help. And you are like, they're trying.
Yeah.
They're trying to get it there. They're trying to get it there. They're trying to get it there. As somebody that's now gone through it, you sit back and go, well, shit. They really aren't trying to help, is what you're feeling.
So Toucans was actually, most of it was in a 30-foot high debris pile covering all of 98 on one side of our building. And a lot of it came down into our parking garage. Early, we could hear helicopters and things. And so, we went out on the balconies and we were like, hey, we need some help. So finally, I think it was around noonish, the FEMA search and rescue, one of them, teams, came by, and we saw them down on the street, and they asked us how do we get up there? And we told them how to make their way, and they knocked on the door, and I opened it, and they said, this building isn't safe, you have to evacuate right now. And he said, you have 5 minutes to pack, and you can't take a suitcase, just take like a backpack size or a small bag you can carry. That's what they told us. We had 5 minutes. So of course you're scrambling. You're thinking, I need my medicine, I need my papers, I need my insurance, and something to wear, maybe. So.
They passed through here.
Because Highway 20 is a main road, and you got 231. So seeing them literally pass right by and thinking they're passing right by us and we need help too.
Yeah.
And I don't think it took them like a week before we ever really got help. These small towns gathered together right after the storm.
We helped one another.
You had neighbors helping neighbors. I mean, even being in Chipley, there was 5 or 6 people in pickup trucks with chainsaws running down each street cutting.
You know it.
And I felt bad because I didn't have a chainsaw out there helping.
I mean, me driving around the city, my city, seeing signs like die, Verizon, die, I'll never forget that as long as I live. To not being able to have communication with people, to work for a company that people hated, still hate for the most part, and I do it to myself every time, I see the comments people post and I read them and I still take it to heart, and I always will.
Someone got news to one of our soldiers in the gymnasium that there was a pregnant woman with a broke foot trapped in her house. And that was just like 3.5 miles away. So we didn't have any communication with our command. We were separated. So we had platoon level leadership, maybe even like a captain there, so squadron. So leadership designed for about 100, 150 people, but we were separated from our main command. So we decided to go out and get her. And that was just as the last part of the wall was leaving, so there were still gusts of 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. And we headed out in an ambulance, me, my platoon sergeant, and then 2 other guys for self-recovery followed us and went out to pick her up. So it was about 3.5 miles away. It took us just shy of 3 hours to get there. Yeah, we were driving over power line poles, over trees, over brushes, through ditches. And at one point we pushed over a fence. We drove through a gentleman's yard. He was actually sitting out on his porch drinking a beer, and he just didn't even skip a beat, just watched us drive through his yard. Yeah.
So that night we were actually up towards the Bayou Georgia area. And right after the storm, our immediate thoughts were, go check on our parents, go check on his parents, go check on people, because we cannot reach them. So we all loaded up in the buddy's truck, started down our slow trek of Star Avenue, and we hit the line of people, and they got out of the truck. Zoe and I stayed in the truck at 8, 9 o'clock at night, and they just started chainsawing and clearing Star Avenue back and forth, just going. They would clear a little bit, drive forward, clear a little bit, drive forward. And there was probably say about 40 people that were in that line trying to get into the Callaway area to check on their homes, check on their families.
And I remember, people from just different places, I can't name them all, that came and volunteered and served food and helped us. And there was people from down in South Florida that I think they were still kind of recovering from a storm themselves, but they came up here to help us.
They opened their arms to me. I can truly say that I've been many places, but coming here, they actually do not look at you as your outer appearance. They actually try to help you and give you the benefit of the doubt. No. And for me, they literally helped me and guided me to get back on my feet.
Like it just, I don't know, it was like a weird haze. Yeah.
I don't even know how to explain it. But it scared me because I ran into a down line and I didn't know if it was live, and it freaked me out really bad, and we were coming down to curfew. And it was a family on 2301 who now I am friends with. They took us in for the night because the dad saw me crying in my truck, and they took us and our animals and kids, and we stayed the night with complete strangers, and it couldn't have been better, really.
Literally 13, 14-hour days. They were so long. And I remember one day, me and my mom were like so exhausted, and we were driving back, and we were just like, we're just so hungry. And, you know, normally we're not big on like fast food. We were so happy to like see a McDonald's, right? So we drive into the McDonald's, and literally as we drive up, because restaurants were closing earlier, they were closed. And we were just like, no, you're kidding me. And my mom said, well, now we can finally say we know how it feels to be hungry and tired. So it was like, that was the first time where, you know, we were literally at a point where, oh my gosh, we can't even get like something from McDonald's. We're literally hungry. We've been working for 13 hours, and yeah, we have like no food in our body. So yeah, you go through things that like you never had gone through before.
But her thing is, in the end, we had a little neighborhood of these plastic kind of houses for kids playing. It's got a kitchen in it. It's got a little house. We had almost a little neighborhood of those things. Oh, and of course, those are all gone. You know, they're big, bulky, like plastic things. And she would say,
my house blew away.
My house blew away. My house blew away. So we'd go to Miami, you know, travel around, and she'd say, oh, my house blew away. And everybody would be like, oh. And we'd be like,
she plays the hurricane
well, our
victim
house is still there.
We have to explain that it's not like our
but
house. She means like her play. But to her, that is her house.
To her,
you know?
it was her
like,
whole little neighborhood. And just recently started adding the little buildings back. Oh,
but she'll still go up and tell people, my house blew away in the sky.
Yeah, but now I like to think that she'll say, but we're rebuilding my little neighborhood. You know?
Hopefully. Yeah. They rolled in and it hit me. I was like, these task force, they have been through Louisiana, had been through Katrina, and South Florida had been through millions of hurricanes, but specifically, most recently, Irma and Maria. So these people knew and understood what we were going through and what would happen next. And I just started to cry because from their pain and their experience, they had come to help us move forward. And people who say, oh, I've lost everything. You have a car full and a storage unit full of stuff. I'm sorry. You don't know what losing everything is until you're the one coming back to your empty lot and finding only a pocket knife and an earring.
Started doing just like they did in the Corps of Engineers is he set up a kitchen. So he got the generator, he got a table outside, he found somebody that had a coffee pot, and whoever had whatever we could bring it all, you know, share and do. And we had a grill, and everybody was, you know, our refrigerator was blown open during the storm, so nothing was salvageable out of it. But there were some that had things that we could grill and things to eat. It's on top of the front door, and there's nails, and I didn't know where any shoes were. And that girl, who I don't even know what her name was, she said, here, take mine. Aww. And I said, well, you need shoes. And she said, no, I'll be fine. Just take mine.
We had, I think, a group from Pennsylvania that all they do is search and rescue. And they came up with a really awesome game plan. Once the main roads were clear, we sent out teams like my husband to clear all the smaller roads, and then 1 square mile by 1 square mile teams were assigned. So you'd have a group of 6 or 7 men and women go out, and their job with our 911 coordinator and GIS mapping, we would print a paper map of 1 square mile of this county, and it would show you where each house was.
Oh, wow.
And so they would just go out and they would check every single house. Yes, for. And then they would come back and get another square mile.
Oh, wow.
And that ensured that, you know, people that may have been trapped without a way to get out of their house to get to a phone were still checked on. Even if it looked like an abandoned house, if it was on that map, you know, they broke in the door and made sure that even if no one answered the door, that no one was inside, that they had left. And then I think they had like chalk spray paint they would do to mark that the house had been checked. And either was evacuated empty or that the residents were transferred somewhere.
Got there, they were calling for flight medics, and they were calling for buses, and they were going out to whether it be Pensacola or Tallahassee or any outlet that was available, those patients got the overflow. And I really feel bad because I don't know how those patients got back, or if they ever came back, or what happened to them. But I know that Bay County did what they had to do to make sure those labs were safe. The EMTs that I know of, don't personally know, but know of, they worked I don't know how many days straight with no day off, devoted to making sure that people were safe and they were okay.
My mother-in-law has Alzheimer's. She was okay. You know, Alzheimer's progresses at its own pace. Every person, it's different. She's the hostess. Even though we're family, you know, known her for years, you come in and she goes, oh, hi, can I get you something to eat, something to drink? You must be hungry, let me make you something. Here, you want some iced tea, you know, whatever. And we're like, no, we're okay, we're okay. The Alzheimer's, she tends to forget she said that, so she repeats it, but that's okay, we know, you know, we understand that. She didn't do that. She was sitting and kind of rocking and mumbling to herself. And she's trying to engage in conversation and she can't. You know, we're like, okay, you know, this happened to the house. You know, my husband and, you know, his sister are talking about what have we got to do. And mom's sitting there going, uh-huh, uh-huh. And I realize she's kind of sitting there and she closes her eyes and she's kind of just mouthing and she kind of curls up gradually into a ball. I mean, a seated, just hunched over. She's never done that before. And I was, without drawing attention to her, at one point I'm kind of like, we got to do something. And Joe's like, yeah, that's what they'd been talking about. They walked outside, walked around the house. So I'm in there with mom trying to keep her engaged and realizing it's not happening, just assessing the house. One window had broken. As it turned out, Mom had been walking around the house inside the whole time the storm's going on, and Debbie kept trying to pull her away from the windows. Well, Mom's concerned. She's got to see what's happening, and Debbie's mom, come away from the windows. They didn't have any shutters. They didn't think they needed them. Not on the coast, not in a flood zone. Everything will be fine. She had been looking out a back window, and we think a piece of the fencing hit it, and the window broke. She wasn't hurt. But that traumatized more than anything. Because Debbie said after that, it was like she literally was in shock. So agreement was, we got to get them out of the house.
In October of 2018, I had a pain in my ribs that I was really afraid was a bone met. And I had a nuclear bone scan done and some other imaging done, and a friend of mine from high school had just passed away from breast cancer, and I was terrified. I had a horrible week, the week of October 6th, and I got my results back on October 6th that said I was okay. And honestly, after the storm, I kept thinking of people who had had tests after mine, of people who were in the middle of radiation, and how it must feel to not know and be waiting and not be able to get your results. Like that was something that really just weighed on me, and I was so grateful that at least I knew that I didn't have that on top of everything else.
It was New Orleans Search and Rescue, and they knocked on my door. Oh my God. It was just seeing those men, and they were in their 40s, 50s, they were older. They went through Katrina and knocking on my door, and I mean, I had to ask for feminine hygiene products, like, because we didn't have anything like that around, you know? To see those men knocking on your door and you knew that everything was gonna be okay, that was a lot.
And we were cutting trees, and the tree fell, and it fell on my dad. And he was in intensive care for 5 weeks, and it pretty much had crushed his whole left side. And ultimately, he was declared brain dead, and they said there was like 3 funguses off of the tree that hit him that had entered his brain.
The first time, I know maybe we can get to that, but I understand why they retire storms now, the name.
So there
there is no place for me to go to know what's normal after a storm like this. Like, there's no medical manual for hurricane survival when your entire community is blown away by a Cat 5. Like, it's not out there. Like, so I've told my people, all I can do is really compare you to each other. And then when all of you have the same thing at the same time, then I think this could be a hurricane-related thing. But it was really bad initially. There was so much mold and dust, and people were burning things, so there was all kinds of allergic and respiratory stuff. People were living in compromised homes. A lot of them still are. So there was that part. Emotionally, it's been really funny because there have definitely been stages. Right afterwards, it's like there was this hypervigilance or this increased startle. I used to say, everyone has a trigger now, and usually it's feeling not in control. So, but when that trigger is brushed against, like, you might think you're doing good, and then when that trigger flips, crazy comes out. And so it was like road rage. It was a perfect trigger. Like, someone honked, and then they would say, I'm losing my mind. Like, I would go crazy on this stranger because they honked at me. And that lasted months initially, a few months. And then that sort of went away. And the thing that I started hearing next was, I'm so tired. I think something's wrong with me. I'm so tired. I'm exhausted all the time. And then following fatigue was memory loss. And that's probably the thing I hear the most right now. Is I think I'm getting demented. I forget things all the time. I make mistakes. I don't know what's wrong with me. But as a whole, like, generally speaking, it was anger, and then it was fatigue, and then it's forgetfulness and concentration, and those two kind of overlapped. And I have no idea what's coming next. Honestly, the single greatest form of medicine immediately following the hurricane was to listen. And it remains the single greatest form of medicine I can do. So initially, every single person who came in, we couldn't move on until they told their story. They had to.
Knowing that I'm not alone in this has really helped, and just having my friends and my family to be there for me to talk to. And just, my dad has helped a lot because he does have PTSD from serving. And so me just being able to talk to him about what I went through and the PTSD that just the trauma and everything, and has helped me a lot. Not gonna lie, for the first couple months after the hurricane, I was drinking more than I should have been, just so that way I could get a night of sleep without the nightmares and everything. And then I talked to my neurologist, and he ended up giving me something that would let me sleep and not have dreams. And so I've been dealing with that.
Because things I take for granted, trees, before the storm, the landscape's changed forever. I didn't realize how powerful that aspect was for me, because I know as an adult they're broken. Hopefully they'll grow back. It may take about 10 to 15. But for my 18-year-old, it was killing him to see the landscape so broken. He said, "They're gone, Mom." And when he said that in that moment, I thought, he's right, they are.
The last couple months, we figured out, I'm part of a mom's group on Facebook, and we were, we'd all done things and had coffee dates and stuff, pre-storm. And then probably 60% of the moms group scattered between being military or just their husbands not having jobs, or they lost their house and just didn't have, and we figured out, when the dust settled, who was staying, and we started doing play dates again, and we started, stuff's been reopening slowly and slowly and slowly. And the day the Target opened, that was a big day. It was
the housing market is horrible, and they're not paying enough. You're triple the housing market, but the job's paying $10, $12, $15 an hour, but it's $2,000 for rent. They don't have the surgery center, so they closed now. My kid's pediatrician just up and quit and is no longer practicing. So we've had to just I just got a letter saying, hey, he's no longer practicing. The depression that hits you from this, it's real. It's really real. You find couples, just me and him never argued. We're having more stresses and the more of the arguing.
The traffic was so bad for not even just the beginning of it, with the debris still there. For months.
That was just as dangerous as Hurricane Michael itself, in my opinion.
So finally I said, honey, we need to buy an RV. And he said, no, I don't know how to, what are we going to do? How are 4 big people and 2 dogs going to live in an RV? I was like, where else are we going to live? In our rotten, broken, gutted house? No. Recently, we're like, wow, we have been in this thing for 7 months now, and it's probably going to be another
And we're
4
coming
months.
up on the 1-year anniversary.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Again, I feel very lucky, and I feel bad for anybody who was. There's people still that are living in rental properties, because they've got to be hard hit. A lot of them. When I was a renter when young, I didn't have renter's insurance.
Or even RVs outside their.
Oh yeah, exactly. That takes a lot of love if you can really live in a small space with somebody.
And animals.
Yeah, and animals, right?
Sticking.
Well, I'm coming to that. We had a kitty, little Siamese, and that was my buddy. She made it through the hurricane perfectly. Yeah. It a month after we were in the new house, she stopped eating, and I'm like, "What's that about?" Oh, no. And then she wouldn't leave. We have her box and her food and stuff in her bathroom. Yeah. And she won't leave the bath mat. And I mean, this is a cat that follows me around everywhere. Yeah. And I'm just looking at her, and she's looking at me, and she seems okay. She's breathing all right. Yeah. So I'm going to see how she is tomorrow. And then if she still hadn't eaten anything, hadn't used her box, I'm like, oh, that's really weird. Of course, you become the Google detective, and you look, oh, it's probably a UTI. Okay. We take her to the vet. They're like, this cat's in bad shape. Not only does she have a UTI, she's also got growth on her liver. Oh, no. She probably had that through the entire storm. Yeah. And a lot of people out there are going to think this is really crazy, but that cat and I had a connection. Yeah. It's like she waited until we were good, and then she said, okay, I got to go. And that's basically what happened.
He said, we've had an equalizer where we are all the same, not a rich man, a poor man, a young man and an old man, not a black man and a white man, we're the same.
And look at the trees that are still snapped in half. All up and down, 11th Street, Jenks Avenue, downtown areas. Yeah. Some of the cemeteries still have open graves. Open graves. Graves that are sunken in and busted up.
The thought of another one hitting us, terrifies me. Absolutely terrifies me. I'm even afraid of a thunderstorm anymore. I've never been afraid of thunderstorms, but I am now. You'll never get over it. What we saw during this storm, after this storm, it's embedded in your mind, in your brain.
I'm going through some form of PTSD because my temper's like real short sometimes, and if I'll lose something and I just go like nuts, like, oh my gosh, where is it? Yes,
the mold, and we have every kind of mold you can comprehend in here right now, and it makes us sick. Yeah. We keep sinus infections on antibiotics right now. Yeah. They brought in loggers from other states, and they have been here trying to salvage what they can. That's good. And one of the men said the other day that there is 10 years worth of just stumps.
I tore apart the word responsibility a lot since the storm, and it's your ability to respond. I have a different definition of it in my head now. It's not like, oh, it's my responsibility to go do this work. No, it's your ability to respond to these situations that you are put in. That's your responsibility.
And being in the comfort of my brother's home was wonderful. But then the second stage begins when you have to deal with your insurance. The car. Here we have no vehicle, we have no home, and for the first time in our adult lives, we have nothing. Not that we didn't lose all of our possessions, because stuff in our condo was not that badly damaged from the roof leak, but it's just like, you're homeless and you don't even have a vehicle. All of a sudden you're just like.
There's a lot of places that were destroyed that's no longer here. Some people are able to rebuild, some people aren't. I don't think there was enough aid to help those that really needed it the most.
I guess this is our new reality. Before the storm, there were trees everywhere and plenty of shade for everything, and it wasn't so dry.
It was nothing left. We literally left Gainesville with half what we had and lost the rest of it here, and have literally started back over from the bottom. But I'm wondering a week and a half, 2 weeks before we could even leave the premises. So
Of the shelter?
yeah, because the debris was so bad. There was. I mean, you couldn't even barely drive or walk. And there's other people that actually lived there that lived in the shelter longer, to where they'll go to another one and come back. And it took a period, I think, a couple of them period like almost a month and a half. Some of them didn't have home to go home to.
Came back and we just started working on the yard, and my cousin from Alabama came, and we were cooking a bunch of food. We served it down at the M&M Mart on our road. So we were just feeding people. It kept me busy, and it kept my brain from focusing on the bad.
That's good.
Met some awesome people that lost way more than I did, that still wanted to help. They get upset when they see a home that gets demolished. I try to explain it. It's a good thing, because that means that, you know, a new home can go there. But I mean, they have students in their classrooms that are still homeless. They see it every day, and they feel it a lot.
Called, and you may have heard of her, Megan McDougal. She literally,
shout out to
Megan McDougal. She, like, I feel like she, from the time the hurricane happened, she was doing something every single day. Like, she's one of the people in Panama City that has literally done the most work.
I think we had more damage, I guess, throughout like our living room than that last little rainstorm than the actual hurricane, because most of the hurricane damage was in the back of the house. But we had this rainstorm come through, and it was flash flooding. I mean, it came up out of nowhere. Drains are flooded.
We had 1.5 feet in the yard, easy.
And it just started coming up, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And we had to rip up our carpet throughout the whole living room and starting down the hall, just from this last little, like, this is a year since the hurricane, and
kind of for a minute forget about all the chaos and have some fellowship. And that's where we saw a lot of people that we didn't know how they were. So we saw some people from church that Adrian knew from around town, and you would check in and be like, okay, how is your house? What do you need?
That's your greeting for the first month.
How's your house? That was the greeting. And even now, if it's someone who you haven't seen in a long time, how's your house? How's your life? What's going on? And I imagine myself still living in that kind of misery a year later. That's what broke my heart, is that we still don't have enough help. We don't have enough programs. And people still don't know where to go for help. Yeah, just as the survivors are getting tired too, us local responders are getting so tired. And so that kind of care too, care for the caregiver, is really important. And when you come in from the outside, just because you've only been here a week and see that this case is an obvious case for attention, you don't see the 150 cases that I've already dealt with and pointed in the right direction and gotten their lives back on track. So, you know, be patient with us caregivers who have been here.
How the prices were going to go up and those kind of things. Yeah. And I was, you know, already thinking in my head, we might not be able to stay here. We might have to go to Pensacola or Tallahassee, and already looking at places there and still see the historic buildings that I've grown up seeing my whole life being demolished is very difficult. You know, when down the street here, the La Royale and the Fiesta, to watch, you know, those buildings I've seen my whole life, and they're just a pile of rubble.
As from a 911 dispatcher point of view, our calls have never gone down to pre-Michael levels.
We moved 14 times total, and we condo surfed, and you know how that is. I mean, somebody from Alabama owns a condo, and they have it available for 2 weeks, but then they have somebody coming in for the weekend, and then it might be a bit. So we ran into that and a lot.
Yeah, like from the 6th floor of a condo to the 14th.
Yeah.
Move over to the next one.
As far as the schools are concerned, we lost 3,000 children and their families left the area. So in that case, that trickles down. So
yes.
Teachers lose their jobs, we lose funding, and so many schools got damaged. We had to consolidate schools. We're still dealing with 4,000 to 5,000 children that are labeled as homeless. they either are living in FEMA trailers or with family or, you know.
Now, I will say this. Anybody that has an employer or has insurance or needs to talk to somebody or whatnot, do it. Don't wait. There are health insurances that allows you, once you have a traumatic event, they will give you 6 free sessions of therapy. You can do phone calls. You can go physically visit someone. You can tell them where you are, and they can tell you who's closest around you that you feel comfortable going to speak with.
Help coordinate your care.
Yes. And if it wasn't for that, I don't know what I would have done. Yes, I had family and friends, but they were also dealing with things that they needed to take care of. I needed somebody to speak to that I could talk to for an hour and a half and just cry my eyes out or scream and yell because I was so mad my hometown had just been destroyed. It's not something to play with. Your mental health is very, very important.
Well, she's in a year. She seems to have gradually come around to the fact there was a major hurricane and it did major damage and we're all okay. She's accepted. She doesn't remember. But
That's really cool.
It's easier. It has become easier. Her memory's gone through other changes of things that, it's just part of it. And we can't help but think that the storm accelerated the changes in her memory, but the trauma seems to have left for the most part.
Almost every staff, all the full-time that we have now in Calhoun County Dispatch was either part-time or full-time during the storm.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have now moved up and are in more authoritative roles. And so I feel like we are awesome, even better prepared than we were now if this ever happened again.
People that came and set up food places here in town that fed people, and we volunteered there, and it was just, there was a lot of bad came out of Michael, but you also seen a lot of good as well, people coming together to help one another, and I think that's what made it bearable, was the community coming together to help one another.
I definitely got some closure when they were demolishing the house. I actually went out there while they were doing it and just watching it, and I know that it will continue to help us build and just get even more stronger as the days and the months go by. And it's going to take a while for us to get to where we were before the storm, but when we do get there, we'll be a lot stronger.
Take a while, and it won't ever look the same.
Yeah.
It'll never be the way that it was before. But I can think of all kinds of things that aren't the way they were before. In my life, personally, they're better.
Yeah.
There was a time when I didn't have kids. Yeah. Having kids was better. There's a lot of things that I went through, illness, whatever.
Yeah.
You can go on and on forever. And just because it's not the same doesn't mean it's worse.
Yeah.
Home is not necessarily a place, it's a feeling.
Yeah.
And I feel like Panama City, again, back to why I love it here. It's a feeling. Home is a feeling. Your home may be gone, it's the 4 walls, but it's what happened within those 4 walls that will take you through it. Yeah. You've got to hold on to that as an encouragement.
It's starting to feel like home again. And most of our houses in our neighborhood have all new roofs. So, we got that accomplished. Yeah. And most of us still don't have fences, and the neighbors are still waiting on mitigation stuff and landscaping. And stuff happens, but we're moving forward and it's visible.
Thought, you walk by faith, not by sight. That's what I thought through the whole time. I was sitting in there for 3 hours. I'm just sitting there going, walk by faith, not by sight.
I like that.
And you do that through this whole thing, and not to make this religious, but, the Lord said, I will not leave you, will not forsake you. Okay, we can do this. Yes. We can bring Panama City back.
Now we're even more a part of the community than ever, because now we've built it from the ground up.
Yeah.
We were here through this whole terrible ordeal. We've all been in it together, and we're all storm tested.
you know, our friendships and our relationships in our community has been tested by one of the worst trials imaginable, and we're still here and we're still strong.
It's almost like a whole renaissance. It was on the cusp of being something very cool and very hip, and now it's turning into something that's just wonderful.
And it's kind of a common thread we can see through people, that maybe the blessings that we can see have come through the destruction. The good that has come to each individual through surviving this disaster in our life. And when you get right down to it, we are our brother's keeper.
After the hurricane, it tore down my trees and you know, plants that I had around my house. And since the hurricane, I have planted so many different varieties of plants along the house and along the fence, and you know, bringing it back up to the tropical paradise that I had prior to the storm. But it's so much better now, because that's what it is. There's new life in the yard that was never there.
But I can say that Bluntstown has made it home. They have opened their arms up and given back a lot that we needed. And you know, it's still a long road of recovery, but I know that if we come together, we can make it.
Because we're going to build better and stronger, and the people out there is just amazing. They're amazing.
We met a lot of amazing people.
And strangers that would come from Alabama or anywhere, other states, to offer you food, go out of their way to come here. I mean, it's just amazing. All the power companies, anybody that does any kind of construction that are still here, you know. The roofers, I feel so bad for those roofers in this heat, but it's the human spirit coming together as one. Just don't give up.
I hope it comes back and it comes back better. And I think we can build through this.
I think the most important thing to remember, and it was hard for me to remember, is this too shall pass.
George, for a while, I saw beautiful stars every night. Now I live downtown, and I see beautiful stars every night without having to try, without having to get out of the telescope and everything.
I think we've still gained our sense of humor. We've still held our heads up. I mean, this is the South. You can't keep us down.
I mean, it was a lot, but we all learned a lot from it too, so I don't think I would change anything, but I don't. Learned a lot about, I mean, obviously insurance and stuff, but about neighbors. We met neighbors that we had never met.
I'm proud to be from here. I think that this has really shown that we have there's a lot of bad that's happened, but we have a lot of good people here and people that are willing to help in any way possible. I think that it brought some people closer together. There may have been neighbors that you never really talked to before, but you know, with this storm, it was just kind of like everybody was talking to each other. Everyone was doing whatever they could do to help the next person. So
it was amazing to see people who used to hate each other just hug each other, just being so glad to see you're alive.
The 2 weeks following the storm were the best 2 weeks since the storm.
That immediate hero thing.
We survived it. Like, we're stronger because of it. Like, I don't think anything negative about it. You know what I mean? Like, to us, it's, I don't know, it's not a bad.
It was a storm that changed things.
Yeah.
There's a saying I read in the dentist office or doctor's office.
I was going to mention.
It's called "There's no such thing as bad weather, different types of good weather." And I asked my dad that. It was around that time with Camille and all. He goes, "That means there's always something good that comes out of a bad situation, like a hurricane."
We're 850 strong. So there's nothing we can't do.
Keep your head down. Keep doing your job. If you look at it too big of a picture, it's overwhelming. If you realize that large disasters like this is just a bunch of little steps and a bunch of little fixes that eventually fix the whole thing, it's a little bit more done. So just focus on what you can get done in a day, 2 days, 3 days, and just keep doing that over and over again. It's the best way I can explain it.
So she painted a picture of her interpretation of the storm, and she got it to say she was giving this to them. But she said, you know what? I am over Michael. I refuse to let Michael have anything to do with my life anymore, beyond the fact that I still have work to do. But she says, Michael doesn't own me. Michael doesn't define me. Michael is history and we're now.
In the middle of that storm, where the word neighbor, the word neighbor was defined.